A millionaire about to die disguised himself as a beggar and asked for help at the door of his own company to leave all his fortune to whoever would help him. Days later, the cleaning lady who had just been fired approached and said 3 words that made him cry like a child. Henry Wallace woke up in a hospital bed without understanding how he had gotten there. The last thing he remembered was being in his office, signing important documents. The white light of the room hurt his eyes, and there was a constant buzz of machines around him monitoring his vital signs. At 60 years old, he had always been proud of his impeccable health, never smoked, drank moderately, and had annual checkups, which made the current situation even more disconcerting. He tried to get up but felt an extreme weakness that made him give up immediately. "Where am I? What happened to me?" he asked the nurse who had just entered the room. The woman in white uniform adjusted the IV in his arm and checked the monitors with precise and professional movements. She wrote down some numbers on a clipboard before turning to him with a gentle but cautious smile. Henry noticed that she avoided direct eye contact, as if she knew something he didn't yet know. His hands trembled slightly as he waited for her answer. "You've been at St. Christopher Hospital for 2 days, Mr. Wallace. You fainted in your office and were rushed here. The doctor will come to speak with you shortly," she said in a soft voice. Henry tried to process the information while observing his surroundings, noticing the sophisticated equipment and expensive decor that indicated he was in the private wing of the best hospital in the city. His business mind immediately began calculating how many important deals he had missed in 2 days of absence, how many meetings were cancelled, and how many decisions were pending. The beige walls with abstract paintings tried to make the environment less hospital-like, but the smell of disinfectant revealed the reality. His hand instinctively searched for the cell phone he always kept within reach. 2 days? But I have a company to run. I need to leave here immediately. Where is my phone? He protested, trying again to get up. The nurse gently placed her hand on his shoulder, preventing him from making unnecessary effort. She put the clipboard in the holder at the foot of the bed and adjusted the pillow so he would be more comfortable. Her movements were efficient, but there was a compassion in her gestures that Henry rarely experienced in his corporate world. The woman walked to the bedside table and opened the drawer. "Your belongings are here, but the doctor asked you to avoid stress. Please rest. Dr. Miller is coming," she insisted before leaving. Henry looked around the room once more, now noticing the complete absence of visitors. No flowers, no cards, just the sterile silence of the hospital environment. The table next to the bed was empty, except for a glass of water and the bell to call the nursing staff. There were no signs that someone had sat in the companion's armchair, no forgotten coat, no magazine browsed by someone waiting for him to wake up. The loneliness of the environment was almost palpable. "Did anyone from the company come to visit me? At least my secretary. Did anyone ask about me?" he asked when the nurse returned to check the IV. The nurse consulted a clipboard hanging on the door, running her finger through the visitor notes from the last 2 days. Her face showed subtle embarrassment when she realized how short the list was. She cleared her throat before answering, clearly uncomfortable being the bearer of that information. Henry already knew the answer before she spoke. "Your cousins Lawrence and Milton came to sign some medical insurance papers. They stayed about 15 minutes. Your secretary called several times to check on your condition," she said, trying to ease the situation. Henry felt an emptiness in his chest that had nothing to do with his physical condition. It was the brutal realization that he had built an empire but was completely alone when he needed support the most. He ran his hands over his face and noticed he was thinner. The 2-day stubble gave him a careless appearance he would never allow under normal circumstances. He looked at his hands and saw they were too pale, with very visible veins as if something was consuming his vitality from within. The mirror in the adjacent bathroom reflected a man he barely recognized. Lawrence and Milton. Of course. They must be calculating how much they'll inherit if I die. I bet they've already consulted lawyers, he muttered bitterly. The door opened, and Dr. Miller entered carrying a voluminous folder with exams and reports, his serious face already anticipating that the news would not be good. He was a middle-aged man with graying hair and thin-framed glasses, with the posture of someone accustomed to giving bad news, but who had never become insensitive to it. He pulled up a chair and sat down beside Henry's bed, opening the folder and organizing the papers on the table. He took a deep breath before starting to speak. "Mr. Wallace, we need to talk about your tests." "Unfortunately, I have difficult news to share," he said with a grave but compassionate voice. Henry straightened up in bed, his business instinct telling him that he should face any problem head-on, without beating around the bush or evasiveness. He had built an empire by making tough decisions and facing crises. This would just be one more to solve. He crossed his arms and looked directly at the doctor, mentally preparing himself for any diagnosis. Years of difficult negotiations had taught him to maintain composure in any situation. "You can speak directly, doctor. I prefer to know the whole truth at once." "What did the tests show?" he asked firmly. The doctor adjusted his glasses and picked up a specific sheet with laboratory test results, pointing to numbers and graphs that to Henry seemed like incomprehensible hieroglyphics. "Doctor." Miller's hands trembled slightly as he explained each alteration found, each abnormal value, each indicator that pointed to the same devastating conclusion. He used simple terms, avoiding unnecessary medical jargon, but the gravity of the situation was impossible to disguise. Henry observed the doctor's face more than the papers. "Mr. Wallace, you have acute leukemia. It's an aggressive type of blood cancer that has progressed very rapidly," the doctor revealed slowly. Henry felt as if the air had been sucked out of the room, the word leukemia echoing in his mind like a sentence. All his achievements, all his money, all his power, none of it mattered in the face of that word. He looked at his hands again, now understanding the paleness, the weakness, the signs he had ignored in recent weeks, attributing them to overwork. His rational mind tried to process the information while his heart beat irregularly. "Leukemia, but how? I had exams 6 months ago and everything was normal. There must be some mistake," he protested, denying reality. "Doctor." Miller shook his head negatively, showing more tests, more irrefutable evidence that there was no mistake. He explained that this specific type of leukemia could develop rapidly, sometimes in a matter of weeks, and that the initial symptoms were easily confused with fatigue or stress. Henry had ignored the signs, the occasional dizziness, extreme fatigue, small purple spots that appeared without reason. Everything made sense now in retrospect. "Unfortunately, there is no mistake. We ran the tests 3 times to be sure. The disease is at a very advanced stage," the doctor confirmed with regret. Henry closed his eyes for a moment, trying to absorb the impact of the news. His entire life had been about control, about planning every move, about building and expanding. Now something completely out of his control was destroying him from the inside. When he opened his eyes again, there was an iron determination in them, the same one he used in impossible negotiations. He wouldn't accept defeat without a fight. "All right, so what's the treatment? Chemotherapy, radiation? How much will it cost? I'll pay whatever is necessary," he said with urgency. The doctor took another deep breath, clearly preparing for the most difficult part of the conversation. He picked up another set of tests, these showing images and more numbers that painted an even grimmer picture. His hands intertwined as he chose the right words to explain what needed to be said. Henry noticed the hesitation and felt a chill down his spine. "Mr. Wallace, the situation is more critical than that. The leukemia has caused extensive damage. Your body would not withstand traditional chemotherapy at this stage," he explained carefully. Henry leaned forward, his hands gripping the sheets with enough force to turn his knuckles white. He had built his fortune always finding alternative solutions when the obvious path was blocked. Surely there would be something, some experimental treatment, some specialist in another country, some hope, however small. His brain was already calculating possibilities, contacts he could activate, favors he could call in. Then what can be done? There must be alternatives. "I have unlimited resources, doctor," he insisted with growing desperation. "Doctor?" Miller nodded, understanding Henry's need to have some hope, some plan of action. He picked up one last document, this one describing the only procedure that could save the businessman's life. It was a minimal chance, but it was a chance, and sometimes that was all a patient needed to keep fighting. He placed the document on the table between them. "There is one option, bone marrow transplant. We would need to find a compatible donor and perform the procedure immediately," he said carefully. Henry clung to that possibility like a shipwreck survivor to a floating piece of wood. Bone marrow transplant was something concrete, something that could be done, a problem that could be solved. His mind immediately began to devise plans, people to contact, specialized hospitals, international marrow banks. Money wasn't an issue. He would pay any amount to find a donor. Perfect, so let's do this. Test my cousins, my employees, anyone. I'll pay $1 million to whoever is compatible, he declared with renewed energy. The doctor raised his hand, asking for calm, and then dropped the final bomb that would change everything. His eyes showed genuine compassion as he destroyed Henry's last practical hopes. The silence in the room was almost palpable as he prepared to speak. Henry already sensed that more bad news was coming. Mr. Wallace, I need to be completely honest. With the current progression of the disease, you have 48 hours at most. Even if we find a donor, the chances are minimal, he revealed with a heavy voice. The room seemed to spin around Henry as he processed the information. 48 hours, 2 days. After 60 years of life, he had only 2 days left. All his empire, all his achievements, everything became irrelevant in the face of the brutal brevity of the time that remained. He looked out the window and saw the city outside continuing its normal routine, indifferent to his fate. 48 hours, that's it? It can't be true, he whispered with a broken voice. Dr. Miller confirmed with a solemn nod, explaining that the leukemia had compromised vital organs and that Henry's body was failing rapidly. Even with all possible medical support, it was a race against time that they would probably lose. They had already tested cousins Lawrence and Milton, neither was compatible. The National Bone Marrow Bank had no compatible donors available. It was a situation practically without hope. We tested your cousins as soon as they arrived. Incompatible. The chances of finding someone compatible in such a short time are practically zero, the doctor admitted. Henry remained silent for long minutes, staring at the white ceiling of the hospital. His entire life passed before his eyes, not as they say happens at death, but as a cruel assessment of what he had done with his time. He had built a business empire but had no one to leave it to. He had millions in the bank, but no one who genuinely cared about him. Lawrence and Milton only wanted his money, that was clear. So, that's it? I'm going to die alone in this room and my cousins will inherit everything, he asked bitterly. It was then that an idea began to form in his mind, something unconventional, but that made perfect sense to him at that moment. If he had only 48 hours, he wouldn't spend them lying down waiting for death. There was something he needed to do, a final mission to give meaning to everything he had built. He looked at the doctor with a determination that surprised the professional. Henry was formulating a plan. Doctor, I need to get out of here. I have something important to do before I die, he announced with sudden firmness. The doctor immediately protested, explaining that any physical effort could kill him even faster, that he needed to remain in the hospital to have any chance, however small. But Henry had already made his decision. If he was going to die, it would be on his own terms, doing something meaningful. He began removing the wires and monitors connected to his body. I'm not going to spend my last hours vegetating in a bed. If I'm going to die, I want to do something that matters, he insisted with determination. Dr. Miller tried to argue once more, but saw in Henry's eyes a determination that could not be broken. It was the look of a man who had accepted his fate, but refused to be passive in the face of it. With reluctance, the doctor agreed to help, as long as Henry signed documents releasing the hospital from responsibility. He called the nurse to bring the necessary papers. If this is what you really want, I'll help, but I need you to understand the risks. You could die at any moment out there, he warned seriously. Henry signed the documents without hesitation, his mind already working on the details of his plan. He asked for simple clothes, something completely different from his expensive suits. He wanted to go unnoticed, become invisible to the eyes of those who knew him. The nurse brought old clothes that had been left by some previous patient, worn and patched. I need old clothes, the simplest you can get. And I need you to dirty my face, mess up my hair. I want to be unrecognizable, Henry instructed. The medical team watched, perplexed, as Henry transformed himself. He put on the ragged clothes, allowed them to dirty his face with soil from a potted plant, completely disheveled his always impeccable hair. In a matter of minutes, the powerful businessman had become a convincing beggar. The contrast was shocking. No one who saw him like this would recognize Henry Wallace. Perfect. Now no one will recognize me. This is exactly what I need, he said, looking at himself in the mirror. Dr. Miller made one last attempt to dissuade him, but Henry was unyielding. He explained that he wanted to test something, to discover if in his company of 500 employees there was someone with true kindness, someone who deserved to inherit what he had built. It was a way to give meaning to his final moments, to ensure that his legacy would go to someone worthy. The doctor finally understood his motivation. You want to test people's kindness? See who would show compassion to a stranger? Asked the doctor, beginning to understand. Henry confirmed with a nod, explaining his reasoning. He always knew people treated him well out of self-interest, for his power and money. Now disguised as a beggar, he would see the true nature of those who had grown rich working for him. If someone showed genuine kindness to a person in need, that person would deserve his fortune. It was a final test, a way to find a worthy heir. Exactly. If I'm going to die, I want to leave everything to someone who has a heart, not to my greedy cousins, Henry confirmed. The plan was simple. He would sit on the sidewalk in front of his own company and observe how his employees would react to a needy beggar. He would ask for help, food, any gesture of kindness. Whoever demonstrated true compassion would be his heir. The doctor agreed to send a nurse to observe from a distance in case Henry needed urgent medical help. I'm going to the front of my company. I want to see if anyone there has enough humanity to help someone in need, Henry explained. With considerable effort, Henry got up from the bed and walked to the door. Each step was a struggle against the weakness caused by his illness, but his determination was greater than the physical pain. The nurse accompanied him to the elevator, clearly concerned but respecting his decision. In the hospital lobby, some people moved away from him, already treating him like the beggar he appeared to be. It's impressive how clothes change the way people see us, Henry observed ironically. The nurse assigned to discreetly accompany him helped him into a taxi, giving the address of Wallace Enterprise to the driver. Henry huddled in the back seat, already getting into the character of a helpless beggar. The driver looked suspiciously through the rearview mirror, but accepted the advance payment from the nurse. During the journey, Henry observed the city through the window, perhaps for the last time. Take me to Wallace Enterprise downtown. You can drop me off at the corner, he told the driver. The trip seemed simultaneously eternal and too quick. Henry felt his heart racing, not just from the disease, but from anxiety about what he was about to do. In a few minutes, he would discover whether he had built a company with people of value or just a den of heartless, ambitious individuals. The taxi stopped at the corner, and Henry got out with difficulty, the nurse staying at a safe distance. Thank you. Now it's up to me, Henry muttered to himself. Walking slowly, Henry arrived in front of the imposing glass and steel building that represented his empire. The irony of the situation did not escape him. The richest man in the city about to sit as a beggar in front of his own company. He chose a spot near the main entrance, where all employees would necessarily pass by. He sat down with difficulty, leaning against the cold wall. Let's see who really has a soul in this company, he thought as he settled in. The afternoon sun was beating down hard, and Henry already felt the thirst and fatigue from his illness intensifying, but he was determined to continue with his test. He observed the first employees passing by, all in a hurry, none even looking in his direction. It was as if he were invisible, part of the urban landscape everyone preferred to ignore. Some even deliberately avoided him. Invisible. That's what we become when we have no power or money, he reflected bitterly. As the hours passed, Henry's disappointment only grew. Executives he had personally promoted passed without even noticing him. Secretaries who received generous bonuses crossed the street to avoid him. Security guards he greeted every day now watched him with suspicion. No one offered help. No one showed compassion. Is it possible that among 500 people there isn't a single kind soul? He questioned himself with growing disillusionment. The sun was beginning to set on the horizon when Henry had lost count of how many people had passed him without even giving him a glance. His back ached from leaning against the cold wall of the building, and thirst made his throat even drier and more painful. A group of young executives walked out laughing loudly, commenting on the quarterly bonuses, and one of them almost tripped over Henry, but instead of apologizing, He just grumbled something about the city hall not doing its job of cleaning the streets. Henry recognized the young man as someone he had personally hired 2 years ago. "Watch where you're sitting, old man. You're blocking the way," shouted the young man as he walked away with his colleagues. Henry's disappointment was almost palpable, a pain that rivaled the one caused by the disease consuming his body. He observed another group of secretaries leaving for happy hour, all elegantly dressed in clothes that their generous salaries allowed them to buy. One of them dropped some coins near him, but when Henry tried to thank her, she clarified that it had been unintentional and quickly collected the money. The woman whispered something to her friends, and they all laughed as they got into a taxi. "My God, how disgusting! I almost touched him when I picked up the coins," she exclaimed while cleaning her hands with hand sanitizer. Henry closed his eyes for a moment, fighting against the nausea and dizziness that came in increasingly frequent waves. The nurse who was watching him from a distance took a step forward, concerned, but Henry discreetly waved for him to keep his distance. It wasn't time to give up yet. There were still employees leaving the day shift. Perhaps someone from the administrative department, or maybe from accounting, would show a bit of humanity. "I still have hope. Someone will prove that not everything is lost," he muttered to himself, although his voice sounded less and less convinced. The building security guard, a burly man whom Henry had greeted every morning for years, approached with a hostile expression. The man stopped in front of Henry, crossed his arms, and stared at him with obvious contempt. Henry remembered having increased the security team's salary last Christmas, a gesture he thought had been appreciated. But now, dressed as a beggar, he was just another problem to be solved. "Listen here, dirty beggar. You have 5 minutes to get out of here before I call the police. You're scaring away the customers," threatened the security guard with a harsh voice. Henry tried to respond, but his voice came out as a hoarse whisper. The disease was taking its toll, and each word was a monumental effort. He raised his hand in a gesture of peace, trying to buy more time. The guard snorted, irritated, but was called back to his post due to some internal problem. Henry knew he wouldn't have much more time there before being forcibly expelled. "Please, just a little longer. Someone has to have a heart here," he whispered, more to himself than to anyone else. The hours dragged on, and the flow of employees began to diminish. The afternoon shift was arriving, and Henry observed a different group of people approaching. They were the cleaning and maintenance staff, wearing simple uniforms and carrying their work materials. They walked with less hurry than the executives, talking among themselves about day-to-day life, about children, about the difficulties of the month. Henry felt a small spark of hope. Perhaps those who know hardship are more compassionate to those who suffer, he thought as he watched the group approach. An elderly lady from the group noticed Henry and whispered something to a younger colleague. The two women looked at each other with an expression that mixed pity and resignation. The older one searched for something in her bag, but the younger one held her arm and shook her head negatively. They passed by Henry, and he heard fragments of their conversation about not having enough money even for themselves. The elderly lady looked back once, with genuine regret in her eyes. "Sorry, mister. If I had something, I would give it, but I'm also without anything," she said with a sad voice before entering the building. Henry nodded in understanding, recognizing that the woman probably would have helped if she could. It was the first time in hours that someone at least recognized his humanity, even without being able to help materially. But that didn't change the fact that he still hadn't found what he was looking for. Someone willing to make a real sacrifice to help a stranger. The sun had already completely set, and the streetlights were beginning to turn on. Perhaps I expected too much from humanity, he reflected with growing bitterness. It was then that Henry noticed a woman approaching with firm but tired steps. She wore the simple uniform of the cleaning team, and her brown hair was tied in a practical bun under the regulation cap. There was something different about her posture, a dignity that transcended her humble position. Evelyn was 45 years old and carried on her face the marks of a life of hard work. But her eyes shone with a kindness that Henry hadn't seen in any of the well-paid executives. "Good afternoon, sir. Are you all right, sir?" she asked, stopping in front of him with genuine concern. Henry looked up, surprised to be treated with respect rather than contempt or indifference. The woman had not only stopped, but was actually looking at him, seeing him as a person and not as a nuisance. He tried to answer, but his throat was so dry that only a hoarse whisper came out. Evelyn immediately knelt beside him, not caring about dirtying her clean uniform on the dusty ground. She gently touched his shoulder, checking if he was conscious and lucid. "Do you need water? Food? Can I call for medical help?" She offered with sincere urgency in her voice. Henry made a supreme effort to form the words, each syllable a battle against the extreme weakness he felt. His hands trembled violently, and he could barely keep his eyes open, but he needed to make his request. The hunger he felt wasn't just physical, but a desperate need to confirm that kindness still existed in the world he was about to leave. Evelyn waited patiently, unhurried, without the impatience that everyone else had shown. "Please, a piece of bread, anything. I'm so hungry," he finally managed to whisper. Evelyn immediately looked at her worn bag, where she kept her modest snack. It was a simple ham and cheese sandwich, prepared before dawn before leaving home, her only meal until the end of her shift at 10 at night. Her stomach was already protesting, as she had skipped lunch to help a sick colleague finish her section. But looking at that man clearly in a worse situation than hers, there was no hesitation. "Of course, sir. Wait a moment. I'll get something for you," she said, rising quickly. Evelyn entered the building and went straight to the small cafeteria for the cleaning staff. She not only took her sandwich, but also used the last coins she had in her wallet to buy a cup of hot coffee from the vending machine. It was 3 reais she had set aside for the bus fare, meaning she would have to walk more than an hour to get home after her shift. But that didn't matter at that moment. She heated the sandwich in the microwave to make it more comforting and put everything in a clean bag. "This man needs it more than I do. I can endure hunger, but he seems to be at his limit," she thought as she hurried back. When Evelyn left the building, she found Henry even worse than she had left him. He was leaning to the side, clearly struggling to stay conscious. She immediately dropped everything on the ground and held his shoulders, helping him straighten up. With careful movements, she opened the coffee and brought it to his lips, helping him take small sips. The hot liquid seemed to revive him a little, and Henry managed to focus his eyes on her. "Slowly, sir. First drink the coffee to warm up. Then you can eat," she instructed with the same patience she used when caring for her elderly mother. Henry drank the coffee gradually, feeling the warmth spread through his cold body. Evelyn then unwrapped the sandwich and broke it into smaller pieces, making it easier for him to eat. She showed no rush, didn't look at the clock, didn't seem to care that her shift had already started. All her attention was focused on ensuring that this needy man received help. Between one piece of the sandwich and another, she conversed softly with him. "My name is Evelyn. Have you been living on the streets for long? Do you have family? Anyone we can contact?" she asked with genuine interest. Henry ate slowly, not only because of physical difficulty, but because he was deeply moved by Evelyn's gesture. Each bite was seasoned with tears he couldn't hold back. Here was someone who didn't have much, but was willing to share the little she had. Someone who treated him with dignity and respect, without knowing who he was or what he could offer in return. It was exactly what he had been looking for during all those hours. "Thank you. You're very kind. You didn't need to do this," he murmured between bites. Evelyn smiled, a genuine smile that lit up her tired face. She adjusted his position better against the wall, making sure he was comfortable. Her hands were calloused from hard work, but her touches were gentle and careful. She noticed that his hands were shaking too much and began to help him hold the sandwich. At no point did she show disgust or hesitation in touching a dirty homeless man. "No need to thank me. We all need help sometimes. Today it's you, tomorrow it could be me," she responded with simplicity. It was at that moment that Evelyn realized how sick Henry really was. His skin was too pale, with a grayish tone that she recognized from when she had cared for her father before he passed away. There was something more than simple hunger or cold afflicting that man. She gently touched his forehead and felt it was feverish. His eyes showed a deep exhaustion, the kind that comes from within, not just physical tiredness. "Sir, you are very sick. You need to go to a hospital." "I can call an ambulance," she offered with growing concern. Henry shook his head negatively, weakly holding Evelyn's hand. There was something he needed to tell her, Something important about her inheritance, about her future, but the words seemed to escape from his foggy mind. He looked into her eyes and saw something he hadn't seen in anyone else that day: true compassion, kindness without ulterior motives. Evelyn didn't know he was rich. She wasn't expecting anything in return. She was there simply because it was the right thing to do. You're different. I need to tell you something. He began with great effort. But before he could continue, a strident voice cut through the air like a razor. Stanton, the cleaning crew supervisor, had exited the building and was standing with his hands on his hips, his face red with anger. He was a short, stocky man, compensating for his lack of height with aggressiveness and authoritarianism. His small, cruel eyes fixed on Evelyn with evident satisfaction at having found something to criticize. "Evelyn, what the hell are you doing standing there? Your shift started 15 minutes ago. Do," he yelled for everyone to hear. Evelyn stood up quickly, but remained between Stanton and Henry as if protecting the sick man. She tried to explain the situation, keeping her voice calm and respectful despite the way she was being treated. Her hands closed into fists, but she maintained her composure, knowing that any reaction could cost her job. Stanton moved closer, invading her personal space, his coffee and cigarette breath making Evelyn step back. "Mr. Stanton, this man is sick and hungry. I was just helping. My shift was due to start in 2 minutes," she explained with a firm voice. Stanton laughed, an unpleasant sound that resembled more of a bark. He looked at Henry with absolute contempt, then turned his attention back to Evelyn. His fat fingers pointed alternately at her and the beggar, gesturing violently as he spoke. Years of petty power had transformed Stanton into a petty tyrant who found pleasure in humiliating his subordinates. "Helping? You're wasting company time with beggars, and on top of that, you're dirtying our uniform by kneeling on the sidewalk," he accused, practically spitting the words. Evelyn maintained her dignity even in the face of the verbal attack. She knew that Stanton was looking for any excuse to exercise his power, especially over her, who never completely bowed to his abusive authority. Other employees began to gather at the entrance, watching the scene but without the courage to intervene. Everyone knew Stanton's temperament and the consequences of contradicting him. "I use my own time and my own food. I didn't harm anyone or the work," Evelyn defended herself calmly. This only enraged Stanton even more. His face went from red to purple, and a vein was visibly pulsing on his forehead. He moved even closer to Evelyn, trying to intimidate her with his physical presence. Henry tried to stand up to intervene, but his legs didn't obey, and he only managed to drag himself a few inches. Stanton noticed the movement and laughed cruelly. "Look at that! The dirty beggar wants to defend the cleaning lady. What a touching scene. Evelyn, you're creating a disturbance and tarnishing the company's image," he shouted even louder. Evelyn looked around and saw her co-workers watching with a mixture of pity and relief that they weren't in her place. She knew each of them, had helped many in difficult times, but she knew that no one would risk their own job to defend her. The weight of injustice was crushing, but she kept her head high. She looked directly into Stanton's eyes without fear, without submission. "Mr. Stanton, helping someone in need can never be wrong. If that tarnishes the company's image, then perhaps the problem lies with the company," she said with a clear voice. The silence that followed was deafening. Even the street traffic seemed to quiet down at that moment. Stanton stood open-mouthed for a few seconds, unable to believe that Evelyn had dared to confront him publicly. When he finally recovered his voice, it came out as a roar. His finger trembled with rage as he pointed to the street. "You're fired. Get your things and get out of here now." He exploded with all the force of his lungs. Evelyn felt the impact of the words like a punch to the stomach. That job was her only source of income. What paid the rent, food, her elderly mother's medicine? But even so, she didn't beg, didn't humiliate herself. There was a line she wouldn't cross, not even for survival. She nodded slowly, removed her badge and handed it to Stanton. "If helping someone in need is grounds for dismissal, then I don't want to work here," she said with unwavering dignity. Stanton took the badge with a victorious smile, clearly satisfied with breaking yet another person. He turned to the other employees who were watching, using Evelyn as an example. His voice took on a warning tone, a veiled threat to anyone who might think of following her example. Evelyn began to walk away, but first cast one last glance at Henry. Anyone who wastes time with beggars will meet the same fate. "Now everyone inside. The show is over," Stanton ordered the spectators. Evelyn walked to Henry one last time, ignoring Stanton's shouts for her to leave immediately. She knelt beside him and held his trembling hands in hers. There were tears in Henry's eyes, not from physical pain, but from pure emotion at the sacrifice she had made. Evelyn smiled, that same kind smile, as if she hadn't just lost everything. "Everything will be all right, sir. Someone will help you." "Don't give up," she said softly. Henry squeezed her hands with all the strength he still had, desperately wanting to tell the truth, to reveal who he was, to reward her immediately for her kindness and sacrifice. But when he opened his mouth to speak, he felt a wave of darkness take over his vision. The effort, the emotion, the illness, all conspired at that moment. Evelyn saw his eyes roll back and his body begin to fall to the side. "No, wait. You need to know her. I am," Henry tried to say, but the words were lost. Evelyn caught Henry before his head hit the ground, supporting him carefully. Stanton continued shouting for her to leave, threatening to call the police, but she completely ignored him. Other employees finally began to approach, some offering help now that the worst was over. Evelyn checked Henry's breathing, felt his pulse weak but present. "Call an ambulance, quickly, he's passing out!" she shouted urgently. A nurse who had been watching from afar finally ran over, identifying himself and taking over medical care. Evelyn helped lay Henry in a safe position while they waited for the ambulance. Stanton retreated, suddenly less aggressive now that there was a real medical emergency. Evelyn remained by Henry's side, holding his hand, even knowing that each second there could bring more problems for her. "Hang in there, sir. Help is coming. You're not alone," she repeated the words she had said before. Henry struggled to maintain consciousness, his vision coming in and out of focus. He could hear Evelyn's voice as if it came from far away, feel the warmth of her hand in his. There was so much he wanted to say, so much he needed to explain. The cruel irony of finally finding someone worthy of his fortune and not being able to communicate it. "Evelyn, you, inheritance," he mumbled, but the words were unintelligible. The ambulance sirens were rapidly approaching, cutting through the night air. Evelyn stayed by Henry's side until the last moment, only stepping away when the paramedics took over. She gave all the information she could to the healthcare professionals, explaining what she had observed about his condition. Stanton watched from a distance, now silent, perhaps realizing the gravity of the situation. "He was asking for food, but he's very sick. Feverish, tremors, very pale. Please take good care of him," Evelyn implored the paramedics. Evelyn quickly climbed into the ambulance with the paramedics, completely ignoring Stanton's shouts in the background, saying she had nothing to do with this. The professionals didn't question her presence, assuming she was a relative or close acquaintance of the patient, and she didn't correct them. She sat on the small bench next to the stretcher where Henry was lying, his eyes closed, and irregular breathing being assisted by an oxygen mask. One of the paramedics connected wires to his chest, while the other prepared an IV bag. "Ma'am, how long has he been like this? Do you know if he has any illnesses?" asked the younger paramedic while checking his vital signs. Evelyn held Henry's hand as the ambulance accelerated through the streets, with the siren cutting through the night traffic. She could feel how cold his skin was, as if life was slowly escaping from him. The heart monitor beeped irregularly, and she didn't need to understand medicine to know that was not a good sign. She observed his face more carefully now under the bright light of the ambulance, and noticed details she had missed in the darkness of the street. He was asking for food about half an hour ago. He was shaking a lot, feverish. "He tried to tell me something important before passing out," she replied, gently squeezing his hand. The older paramedic assumed a worried expression while checking Henry's pupils with a small flashlight. He exchanged a meaningful look with his colleague and increased the oxygen flow. The ambulance made a sharp turn, and Evelyn had to hold on to avoid falling, but she didn't let go of Henry's hand. She noticed that even unconscious, his fingers seemed to respond slightly to her touch, as if on some level he knew he wasn't alone. Pressure very low, irregular pulse. "Tell the hospital we're coming in with a possible critical case," the senior paramedic instructed the younger one. The journey to the hospital seemed simultaneously eternal and too quick. Evelyn observed each difficult breath Henry took, every movement of the paramedics trying to stabilize him. She began to whisper a prayer softly, asking for a miracle, pleading that this man whom everyone had ignored would have a chance to survive. The city lights passed rapidly through the small windows of the ambulance, creating a play of shadows on his pale face. "Sir, you need to hold on. We're almost at the hospital." "They'll take good care of you," she said close to his ear, hoping somehow he could hear her. The emergency doors of the municipal hospital opened before the ambulance had completely stopped. A medical team was already waiting with a hospital stretcher, and Henry's transfer was done in seconds. Evelyn quickly got out and tried to follow them, but a nurse held her by the arm. The woman had a kind but professional face and led Evelyn to the reception while the medical team disappeared with Henry through double doors that said, "Restricted access." "Ma'am, I need you to fill out some forms about the patient." "Name, documents, medical history," said the nurse, handing her a clipboard. Evelyn looked at the papers, not knowing what to write. She knew nothing about that man except that he was sick and needed help. She didn't know his name, his exact age, if he had family or pre-existing conditions. Her hands trembled slightly while holding the pen, the reality of the situation finally hitting her completely. She had lost her job for helping a complete stranger who was now fighting for his life. I don't know his name. I found him on the street asking for food. He looked very sick, so we called an ambulance," she explained with a shaky voice. The nurse nodded with understanding, apparently accustomed to similar situations. She wrote "unidentified indigent" on the form and asked Evelyn to wait in the waiting room. The place was crowded even at that hour of the night, with people of all ages waiting for care. Evelyn found a chair in the corner and sat down, her janitor uniform still dirty from the sidewalk where she had knelt. She looked around and saw suffering etched on every face, the anguish of waiting, the uncertainty about loved ones. The hours dragged slowly, and Evelyn fought against fatigue and hunger. Her stomach protested the lack of dinner she had given to the homeless man, and her eyes burned with sleep, but she refused to leave. From time to time, doctors and nurses hurried past, and she tried to obtain information, but no one knew or could say anything about the unidentified man. The television in the corner broadcast news that she couldn't follow, her mind focused only on that man fighting for his life. "Please, can someone tell me how he is? The man who arrived by ambulance 3 hours ago." She asked for the 5th time to a different nurse. Finally, when the clock marked almost 2 in the morning, a young doctor appeared looking for her. Dr. Margaret had deep dark circles but a determined look, clearly in the middle of a long shift. She led Evelyn to a small private room used for conversations with family members, which made Evelyn's heart race with concern. The doctor sat across from her and opened a folder with test results. "Are you a relative of the patient you brought in? We need to talk about his condition," said Dr. Margaret seriously. Evelyn explained again that she didn't know the man, but that she couldn't simply abandon him there. The doctor seemed surprised but respected the compassion shown. She then began to explain the situation, using simple terms so Evelyn could understand. The man had a serious blood disease, something that was destroying his defenses and needed urgent treatment. Without this specific treatment, he wouldn't survive more than a few hours. He has terminal stage leukemia. The only chance would be a bone marrow transplant, but we don't have compatible donors available, the doctor explained with evident regret. Evelyn felt tears forming in her eyes. After everything that had happened, after sacrificing her job to help him, that man would still die alone and nameless in a public hospital. Something about that injustice deeply revolted her. She remembered the desperation in his eyes when he tried to speak, as if he had something urgent to communicate. Without thinking too much, the words left her mouth before she could contain them. "What if I'm compatible? Can I take the test? Can I try to donate?" she offered with sudden determination. Dr. Margaret was clearly surprised by the offer. It was rare for someone to offer to donate marrow to a complete stranger, especially someone who clearly didn't have the financial resources to deal with possible complications. She studied Evelyn for a moment, seeing the sincerity in her eyes, the determination in her posture despite the evident fatigue. The doctor took a deep breath before answering. Ma'am, compatibility for bone marrow is very rare. The chances of being compatible with a stranger are minimal. Besides, it's a serious procedure, she carefully warned. Evelyn insisted, something inside her telling her she needed to at least try. She couldn't explain it rationally, but she felt a connection with that man, as if their destinies were somehow intertwined. She thought about all the times in her life when she needed help and received it, about all the people who were kind to her when she needed it most. Now it was her turn to give back to the universe. Doctor, please, let me at least take the test. If I'm not compatible, at least I tried. If I am, I saved a life, she argued with conviction. The doctor agreed to perform the test, more to calm Evelyn than because she believed it would work. She led her to the laboratory, where a nurse collected several blood samples. The procedure was quick, and Evelyn was instructed to wait in the waiting room again. Dr. Margaret said the preliminary results would be ready in about an hour, but that she shouldn't get her hopes up. Evelyn returned to her uncomfortable chair, now with a bandage on her arm where they had collected the blood. May God's will be done. If it's for me to save this man, so be it, she murmured in prayer. Time passed even more slowly as she waited for the results. Evelyn dozed off a few times in the chair, waking up startled and checking the clock. Other patients came and went, but she remained there, her solitary vigil for a nameless man. At 4 in the morning, she saw Dr. Margaret running toward her with an expression that mixed shock and urgency. The doctor seemed to have difficulty believing what she was about to say. "Mrs. Evelyn, you need to come with me now. It's urgent," she said, pulling Evelyn by the arm. Evelyn was quickly led through corridors that seemed like a maze, climbing stairs and passing through various wards until they reached a medical conference room. Inside were 2 more doctors, all with serious expressions but with a glimmer of hope in their eyes. Dr. Margaret closed the door and turned to Evelyn with the test results in hand. The silence in the room was tense, everyone apparently aware of the gravity of the moment. "Mrs. Evelyn, this is extremely rare, but you are compatible, perfectly compatible. It's almost a miracle," the doctor revealed with an emotional voice. Evelyn felt her legs weaken and had to support herself on the table. The coincidence was impossible to ignore. Of all the people in the city, precisely she, who had lost everything to help him, was the only one who could save him. Tears now flowed freely down her face as she processed the information. The doctors quickly began to explain the procedure, the urgency of the situation, but there was something else they needed to say. "This is a sign. It has to be. God put this man in my path for a reason," she said with a choked voice. One of the older doctors with white hair and thick glasses cleared his throat uncomfortably before speaking. He had the posture of someone about to deliver difficult news, and Evelyn immediately realized there were complications. The doctor adjusted his glasses and consulted some papers before looking directly at her. His voice was gentle but firm when he began to explain. "Mrs. Evelyn, before we proceed, I need to be completely transparent about the risks. During the tests, we discovered something in your blood," he said pausingly. Evelyn felt her heart racing, imagining what kind of problem could prevent the donation. She looked at the faces of the doctors, all serious and concerned, and prepared herself for more bad news in a night full of them. Dr. Margaret gently placed her hand on her shoulder, offering silent support. The doctor continued, showing some test results that Evelyn didn't understand, but that clearly worried the professionals. "You have a cardiac condition that wasn't diagnosed before. It's controllable, but it makes the donation procedure riskier for you," he explained carefully. The doctor explained that the anesthesia necessary for bone marrow extraction, combined with her cardiac condition, created a significant risk. There was a real chance of complications during the procedure, including the possibility of cardiac arrest. The numbers and medical terms mixed in Evelyn's mind, but she understood the essentials. She could die trying to save that man. The room fell silent as everyone waited for her reaction. "What's the percentage of risk? I mean, what's the chance of something going wrong with me?" she asked in a surprisingly calm voice. The doctors exchanged glances before Dr. Margaret responded. She explained that with proper monitoring and taking all precautions, the risk would be approximately 30% of serious complications. It was too high a risk for an elective procedure, especially to save a stranger. Any rational person would back away from such odds. Evelyn closed her eyes for a moment, thinking about her life, her elderly mother who depended on her, the bills that needed to be paid. "And if I don't make the donation, what are his chances of survival?" she asked, opening her eyes. The answer was unanimous and definitive: 0. Without the transplant, the man would die in the next few hours. There were no other options, no other compatible donors available, no other possible treatments. It was Evelyn or certain death. She rose from her chair and walked to the window, observing the sky beginning to brighten with the first signs of dawn. She thought about all the choices she had made in life, all the times she chose to help even when it harmed her. "If I die saving a life, my existence will have been worthwhile. If I live, I'll have an incredible story to tell," she said, turning to the doctors. Evelyn announced her decision with unwavering firmness. She would make the donation, accepting all risks. The doctors tried once more to dissuade her, reminding her that she didn't know the patient, that she had no obligation whatsoever, that her own life had value. But Evelyn had made her decision with her heart, not with reason. She asked only for a few minutes to make a phone call. "I'll donate. Prepare everything necessary. I just need to call my mother first," she declared with determination. The call to her mother was the hardest part. Evelyn tried to keep her voice steady while explaining that she was at the hospital, that she needed to undergo a procedure to help someone, but that she would be fine. She lied, saying there were no risks, that it was something simple. Her mother, with the wisdom of years, sensed there was more to the story but respected her daughter's decision. Evelyn promised to return home soon and hung up before tears betrayed her. "Mom, I love you very much. Take care of yourself. I'll be home soon," were her last words on the phone. Preparations for the surgery began immediately. Evelyn was taken to undergo more tests, sign various consent documents, and receive detailed explanations about the procedure. She barely paid attention to the technical details. Her mind focused only on the certainty that she was doing the right thing. She was given a hospital gown and instructed to remove all her personal belongings. "Please, can I see him before the surgery? Just for a minute," she asked Dr. Margaret. Evelyn was taken to the room where Henry was. He remained unconscious, connected to various machines, his breathing assisted by equipment. She approached the bed and gently touched his hand, noticing it was even colder than before. Even not knowing if he could hear her, she spoke softly near his ear. The words came from the depths of her heart, laden with emotion and purpose. "Sir, I don't know your name, but I'm going to help you. Stay strong, you'll get better soon, you're not alone," she whispered, squeezing his hand. Back in the preoperative area, Evelyn was prepared for the procedure. An intravenous line was placed in her arm. Monitors were connected to track her vital signs. Dr. Margaret remained by her side, explaining each step, offering comfort. Other doctors came and went, checking equipment, confirming details. Evelyn kept her eyes closed, silently praying. "Doctor, if something happens to me, tell my mother I did this by choice, that I died doing good," she asked, holding the doctor's hand. "Doctor," Margaret promised, but assured her they would do everything so that both would survive. Evelyn was then taken to the operating room, a sterile white environment with intense lights and equipment she didn't recognize. The medical team was fully gowned, only their eyes visible above their masks. She was transferred to the operating table, and the anesthesiologist began explaining the procedure. Evelyn merely nodded, her decision already made, her peace already found. "We're ready to begin, Ms. Evelyn. I'll ask you to count from 10 to 1, said the anesthesiologist. Evelyn began counting as the anesthesia was administered. With each number, she felt lighter, more distant. She thought about her life, the choices that had led her to this moment. She thought about the unknown man she was saving, wondering what story he might have, what life he had lived. She thought about her mother waiting at home. She thought about Stanton and the lost job, but felt no anger, only pity. 10, 9, 8, 7, C. She counted before darkness enveloped her. The last thing Evelyn saw before losing consciousness were Dr. Margaret's eyes above the surgical mask, conveying confidence and gratitude. The last thing she thought was a simple but sincere prayer for the life of the man she was saving. And then silence, as the doctors began the delicate procedure that would unite the fates of two people whom chance had brought together. "Beginning marrow extraction, all vital signs stable," announced the lead surgeon. In the room next door, Henry remained unconscious, his life depending entirely on the success of that procedure and on the kindness of a woman who had sacrificed everything to save him. The monitors in both rooms beeped in rhythm, two hearts beating, two lives intertwined by destiny and by the purest demonstration of love for one's neighbor. The surgery had begun, and with it, the last hope of salvation for Henry Wallace. Evelyn opened her eyes slowly, the white light of the hospital room making her head throb with a dull but persistent pain. It took a few seconds to remember where she was and why her body felt so heavy and sore. The memory of the surgery returned gradually, along with the awareness that she had survived the risky procedure. She tried to move but felt a sharp pain in her back where they had extracted the bone marrow, making her moan softly. A nurse entered the room upon hearing the sound, checking the monitors and adjusting the pillow to make her more comfortable. "Thank God you're awake. It's been 2 days since the surgery. How are you feeling?" asked the nurse with a gentle smile. Evelyn tried to speak, but her throat was as dry as if she had swallowed sand. The nurse quickly grabbed a cup with water and a straw, helping her drink small sips. The relief was immediate, although the simple act of swallowing required more effort than she expected. Her thoughts immediately went to the man who had received her marrow, that nameless, homeless man she had tried to save. The memories were hazy, but she clearly remembered the decision to risk her life for him. The man, the one who received my marrow, did he survive? Is he all right? She managed to ask in a hoarse voice. The nurse adjusted the IV in Evelyn's arm, while responding that the patient had been transferred to another hospital as soon as he stabilized, but that the transplant had been successful. She had no more information beyond that, explaining that due to medical privacy issues, they couldn't share details about other patients. Evelyn felt a deep relief knowing that her efforts had not been in vain, that the man would have a chance to live. Even without knowing him, she felt a special connection with him, as if their destinies were somehow intertwined. "I'm glad he's okay. That was all I needed to know. It was worth it," she said, closing her eyes again. The next 3 days passed in a blur of examinations, medications, and forced rest. Evelyn was informed that she would need to stay a few more days under observation due to her heart condition, but that her recovery was progressing well. During this time, she had plenty of opportunity to think about her current situation. Without a job, without savings, and now with medical bills she didn't know how to pay. The hospital had covered the costs of the surgery as it was a donation, but the post-operative care was her responsibility. "How am I going to pay for all this? I barely have money for food," she thought, while looking out the window of her room. On the 5th day after surgery, Evelyn was finally discharged. Doctor Margaret came personally to say goodbye, thanking her again for the heroic act and wishing her good luck. Evelyn put on her cleaner's uniform again, now wrinkled and stained from the fateful night when everything changed. She had no other clothes, no way to ask someone to bring something from home. She signed the discharge papers with trembling hands, the reality of her situation weighing on her shoulders like a mountain. "Thank you for everything, Doctor. You saved 2 lives. God bless your work," said Evelyn, hugging the doctor. The walk home took almost 2 hours. Evelyn had to stop several times to rest, her body still weak from surgery and lack of proper nutrition. Each step was a struggle, each climb a mountain to be scaled. People rushed past her, no one noticing her suffering or offering help. It was ironic how she had lost everything by helping someone, and now when she needed it, she was completely alone. The midday sun punished mercilessly, and she didn't even have money to buy a bottle of water. "One step at a time, soon I'll be home," she repeated to herself like a mantra. Upon finally reaching her small apartment in a humble neighborhood of the city, Evelyn found her elderly mother worried and in tears. The lady had spent days without proper news, just the quick call before surgery, and a message from the hospital informing that she was well. Evelyn carefully hugged her mother, her own eyes filling with tears seeing the state of concern of the woman who had raised her with so much love and dedication. The apartment was emptier than usual, and Evelyn soon discovered why. "Daughter, where were you? I had to sell some things to buy my medicines I couldn't pay," explained her mother between sobs. Evelyn comforted her mother, assuring that everything would be fine, even though she had no idea how she would fulfill that promise. She explained superficially about having helped someone at the hospital, avoiding details that would only worry the lady more. Looking around, she saw that the small television had disappeared, as well as the microwave and some other items of more sentimental than monetary value. The refrigerator was practically empty, only a few eggs and a little rice remaining. Evelyn forced a smile and began preparing a simple meal for both of them. "Don't worry, Mum, tomorrow I'll start looking for another job. We'll get through this together," she promised while cooking. The following days were a brutal sequence of rejections and humiliations. Evelyn visited all the cleaning companies in the region, but the news of her dismissal for job abandonment had spread quickly in the field. Stanton had made sure to burn all her bridges, telling his distorted version of the story to anyone who asked. In each interview, as soon as they checked her references, doors closed. Some interviewers didn't even disguise their disdain. Others pretended they would contact her but never did. "I'm sorry, but we don't have vacancies at the moment," was the standard response she heard dozens of times a day. Evelyn expanded her search to other types of work: waitress, salesperson, supermarket cashier, anything that paid enough to survive. But at 45, with no experience in other areas and a recent gap in employment, opportunities were practically non-existent. She walked miles a day to save on transportation, her already worn shoes now completely destroyed by excessive use. Sometimes she arrived home with bleeding feet, hiding the pain from her mother to not worry her even more. "Today didn't work out, but tomorrow I'll surely get something," she lied every night. The second week after discharge was when the situation became truly desperate. The landlord appeared demanding 2 months of overdue rent, threatening eviction if he didn't receive at least part of it in 3 days. Evelyn begged for more time, explained about the illness, about looking for work, but the man was inflexible. He had his own bills to pay, his own family to support. Evelyn promised to get the money, even though she had no idea where it would come from. "Please, just 1 more week. My mother is elderly. We have nowhere to go," she begged on her knees. That night, Evelyn cried silently in the bathroom so her mother wouldn't hear. The weight of everything was becoming unbearable, the physical pain still present from the surgery, the exhaustion of the fruitless job search, the constant humiliation, the fear of eviction. She looked at herself in the cracked mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. She had lost weight she didn't have to lose. Deep, dark circles marked her face, her once well-kept hair now dull and lifeless. "I did the right thing. I saved a life. Why am I being punished?" She questioned her reflection. The next day, Evelyn made the most difficult decision of her life. She began selling the few belongings that still remained. First were the simple jewels she had inherited from her grandmother, pieces of more sentimental than monetary value, but which yielded enough to buy food for a week. After that, it was her bed, sleeping on the floor on old blankets so her mother could keep hers. Each item sold was a piece of her dignity being torn away. But there was no choice. "How much will you give me for this ring?" "It was my grandmother's, but I need the money," she negotiated with the pawn shop owner. Food became a calculated luxury. Evelyn ate only once a day, ensuring her mother had at least 2 meals. When her mother asked why she wasn't eating, she invented excuses about having eaten on the street while job hunting. Hunger became a constant companion, a dull ache in her stomach that she learned to ignore. Sometimes, when the dizziness became too strong, she drank sugar water to have enough energy to continue looking for work. "I'm not hungry, Mum. I had a big snack earlier today," she lied, while her stomach protested. On the 20th day after leaving the hospital, Evelyn fainted in the street from weakness. She woke up a few minutes later with people around her, someone offering water, others asking if she needed an ambulance. She refused medical help, knowing she couldn't afford it, and staggered back home. That day, she didn't have the strength to lie to her mother, admitting she hadn't eaten anything in 2 days. The two cried together, the elderly mother feeling guilty for being a burden, Evelyn feeling like a failure for not being able to take care of her. "Forgive me, Mother. I promised I would take care of you and I'm failing," sobbed Evelyn. It was then that Evelyn remembered the man she had saved. She didn't know his name, had no way to find him, but sometimes caught herself wondering if he was okay, if he had fully recovered. Did he have family who took care of him? Did he return to the streets? The irony of having saved someone who was probably in a better situation than hers now didn't escape her. But even with everything, she didn't regret it. She had made the right choice. Of that, she was certain. I hope he's okay, she thought in the most difficult moments. The landlord's deadline arrived on a rainy Thursday morning. Evelyn had managed to gather only half of 1 month's rent by selling everything she could, including her only winter coat. The man appeared early, knocking on the door forcefully, already accompanied by 2 large men who were clearly there to carry out the eviction if necessary. Evelyn opened the door holding the little money she had managed to get, her hands trembling not from fear, but from humiliation. Years of honest work, of dignity, reduced to this moment. It's all I could get. Please accept it as a down payment and give me more time. She offered the money. The landlord counted the bills with disdain, shaking his head negatively. It wasn't enough. The rules were clear. He had already been more than patient. He began to talk about legal procedures, about having 24 hours to leave, about how it wasn't personal, just business. Evelyn heard the words as if they came from far away, her mind trying to process the reality that she and her elderly mother would be on the streets in a day. They had no family, no friends close enough to ask for shelter. 24 hours. Not a minute more. If you don't leave, I'll throw your things on the street, threatened the landlord. Evelyn closed the door and leaned against it, sliding to the floor. Her mother watched her from the small living room, her face marked by worry and fear. How to explain to a 70-year-old woman that they would be evicted? How to say that a lifetime of work sacrifice had led to this? Evelyn got up, wiped away her tears and went to her mother, embracing her with all the tenderness she could still gather. She said nothing about the eviction, only that everything would be okay. Rest, mother. I'll figure everything out, she lied once more. The rest of the day was spent in silent desperation. Evelyn tried calling former co-workers, begging for help, for a loan, for anything. But everyone had their own difficulties, their own families to support. Some didn't even answer, already knowing the reason for the call. She considered looking for shelters, but they were all full, and the waiting list was long. The rain continued to fall as if the sky was crying with her. "Someone please, any help, I just need a chance," she murmured into the phone that no one answered. That night, while her mother slept, Evelyn began to pack the few belongings they had left in cardboard boxes she had picked up at a supermarket. Each stored object was a memory, a part of her life being boxed up. Family photos, important documents, the few clothes that remained. She worked in silence, tears constantly falling as she accepted the reality of her situation. Tomorrow they would be homeless, without perspective, without hope. How did we get to this? Where did I go wrong? She questioned herself while closing another box. Around midnight, exhausted physically and emotionally, Evelyn sat on the floor of the empty kitchen. The refrigerator had stopped working days ago due to lack of payment for electricity, cut off a week ago. They were using candles for lighting, as if they had gone back a century in time. She thought again about the man she had saved, wondering if he would ever know the price she paid for that act of kindness. Not with anger or regret, but with hope that he had managed a better life. "Are you okay? Has your life and health improved?" she asked the emptiness. Evelyn must have dozed off right there on the cold kitchen floor, because she woke up to the sound of birds singing and the weak light of dawn coming through the window. Her whole body ached, the surgery still taking its toll, hunger and exhaustion amplifying every discomfort. She got up with difficulty and went to check on her mother, who was still sleeping peacefully, oblivious to the drama that would unfold in a few hours. Evelyn watched her with affection, memorizing every detail of her aged but still beautiful face. "Forgive me for failing you," she whispered. Determined to try one last time, Evelyn left early, leaving a note for her mother saying she had gone out to resolve some things. She walked to the city center, entering each commercial establishment begging for work, any work. She offered to clean for free for a week to prove her worth, to work for half the minimum wage, anything. But the answers were always the same. There were no vacancies, they didn't need anyone, she should look elsewhere. "Please, just one chance. I'm hard-working, honest, I'll do any job," she begged without success. At noon, defeated and without strength, Evelyn began the long walk back home. Each step was heavy with the knowledge that she had failed, that she had not achieved the miracle she needed. She passed by the company where she had worked, seeing from afar the entrance where everything had begun, where she had met the homeless man, where she had lost her job, where her life had completely changed. She arrived home in the middle of the afternoon, finding her mother sitting in the living room, surrounded by the boxes Evelyn had prepared during the night. The lady had discovered about the eviction and was crying silently, holding an old family photo. Evelyn went to her and hugged her, the two crying together, without words, just sharing the despair of the moment. The clock on the wall marked 3 o'clock. Only a few hours remained before the final deadline. "Mom, forgive me, I tried everything, but I couldn't do it," said Evelyn with a broken heart. The two women spent the next hours in a kind of trance, finishing packing the last things, mentally preparing for the inevitable. Evelyn helped her mother dress in the best clothes they still had, wanting to maintain some dignity even in disgrace. "We'll leave with our heads held high, Mum. We are poor, but we have dignity," she said, trying to be strong. At 5 in the afternoon, Evelyn began taking the boxes to the hallway, preparing everything for the forced exit. Each box carried was a weight on her heart. Each object abandoned a part of her life left behind. Some neighbors watched from half-open doors, some with pity, others with relief not to be in her place. Nobody offered help, all too busy with their own difficult lives. Evelyn didn't judge them, she understood perfectly. That's how it is, each with their own problems, she thought as she carried another box. Her mother was sitting in a chair in the hallway, holding a small bag with documents and some objects of sentimental value. The lady had stopped crying, now just observing everything with sad resignation. So Evelyn tried to cheer her up, talking about finding temporary shelter, about things getting better, but her words sounded empty even to herself. The sun was beginning to set, tinting the sky orange and red, as if the day itself was bleeding. "Maybe it's better this way, daughter. I'm old, I'm a burden," said her mother in a weak voice. Evelyn immediately knelt before her mother, holding her wrinkled hands firmly. She would not allow the woman who had raised her with so much love to think like that, no matter how desperate the situation was. She looked into her mother's tired eyes and spoke with all the conviction she could gather, promising that they would find a solution, that this was just temporary, that better days would come. Even without believing her own words, she needed to give her mother hope. "You will never be a burden. You are my reason to fight. We will overcome this together," she affirmed with determination. It was almost 6 o'clock when Evelyn heard footsteps in the hallway. Her heart raced, thinking it was the landlord with the final eviction order, perhaps even with the police to ensure they left. She positioned herself protectively in front of her mother, prepared to beg for a few more hours, just enough time to find somewhere to spend the night. The footsteps approached, firm and decisive. Evelyn took a deep breath, preparing herself for yet another humiliation. "Let it be quick, please, don't humiliate my mother," she prayed silently. But the footsteps stopped before reaching them. Evelyn heard voices at the end of the hallway, an argument she couldn't fully understand. There seemed to be some confusion, someone looking for something or someone. She considered checking what was happening, but didn't want to leave her mother alone. The voices grew louder, closer, and Evelyn recognized the landlord's voice arguing with someone. "This can't be good," she thought, hugging her mother tighter. Suddenly silence. The footsteps began again, this time faster, more urgent. Evelyn closed her eyes, preparing for the worst. Her mother squeezed her hand, the two women united in their moment of greatest vulnerability. The sound of footsteps echoed in the narrow hallway, each one like a drum announcing their fate. Evelyn opened her eyes when the footsteps stopped right in front of them. "The time has come, whatever God wills," she whispered to her mother. But when Evelyn looked up, it wasn't the landlord standing there. It was a man she didn't immediately recognize, well-dressed, with a healthy appearance, completely different from the last time she had seen him. It took a few seconds for her brain to process, to connect that clean-shaven face with the dying beggar she had helped. Her eyes widened in shock when realization hit her. "It can't be. Is it you, sir?" she asked with a trembling voice. The man smiled, that same smile she had briefly seen on that fateful night, but now strong and full of life. Henry Wallace was there, standing before her, alive and healthy thanks to her sacrifice. He stepped forward, His eyes filled with tears of gratitude and something more, determination. Evelyn couldn't speak, couldn't move, just stared in complete shock. "Evelyn, I finally found you. I've come to repay what you did for me," Henry said with a choked voice. Evelyn remained paralyzed in the hallway, her hands shaking uncontrollably as she looked at Henry Wallace, the man she had saved, thinking he was just a needy beggar. He was impeccably dressed in a navy blue suit that clearly cost more than she earned in several months. His hair now combed back, revealing a distinct and healthy face. The transformation was so complete that if it weren't for the same brown eyes she had seen filled with despair that night, she would never have recognized him. Her elderly mother observed the scene without understanding, holding her daughter's arm tightly, sensing that something extraordinary was happening. "My daughter? Who is this man? Why is he here?" the old lady asked with a weak and confused voice. Henry took another step forward, his eyes never leaving Evelyn's face, as if he needed to memorize every detail of the woman who had completely changed his perspective on life and humanity. He carried a leather portfolio in his hands, and there was an urgency in his movements, like someone who had waited too long to correct an injustice. Behind him, Evelyn now noticed there were two men in suits waiting in the hallway, clearly security guards or assistants. The contrast between the evident poverty of the worn hallway and the imposing presence of those well-dressed men was almost surreal. "Evelyn, we need to talk. There is so much I need to explain, so much I need to thank you for," Henry said with a voice choked with emotion. Evelyn tried to form words, but her throat was dry and her mind spinning in circles trying to process the impossible. The dying beggar she had fed with her last sandwich, for whom she had lost her job, for whom she had risked her life donating marrow, was standing there as an obviously rich and powerful man. The cardboard boxes with their few belongings piled in the hallway seemed even more pathetic now, evidence of her extreme poverty contrasting with his obvious wealth. She looked at her own calloused hands, at her simple clothes, and felt a wave of shame. "I don't understand. You were dying. You were a beggar. How is this possible?" she finally managed to stammer. Henry took a deep breath and began to explain, his voice gaining strength as he revealed the truth. He told her about being the owner of the company where she worked, about his terminal leukemia, about his desperate decision to test the kindness of his employees before dying. Each word was like a piece of a puzzle fitting together, but the complete picture still seemed too impossible to be real. Evelyn had to lean against the wall to avoid falling, her legs suddenly too weak to support her. Her mother heard everything with wide eyes, alternating her gaze between Henry and her daughter. "My God, you are Henry Wallace, the company owner? But why did you pretend to be homeless?" asked Evelyn with a trembling voice. Henry explained about his loneliness, about not having direct heirs, about wanting to leave his fortune to someone who truly deserved it. He told how he spent hours being ignored and despised by well-paid executives, by people he had helped to enrich. His eyes filled with tears when he described the moment Evelyn appeared, the only one among 500 employees who showed genuine compassion. He moved closer, now close enough for Evelyn to see the tears running down his face. "You were the only one who saw me as a human being. You shared your last meal, lost your job for helping me, and then you saved my life," he said, his voice breaking with emotion. The landlord appeared in the hallway at this moment, clearly irritated by the commotion and ready to execute the eviction. But upon seeing Henry and his companions, his posture immediately changed. It was obvious that he recognized power and money when he saw it, and his usual arrogance was quickly replaced by a cautious subservience. Henry didn't even look at him, taking a checkbook from the inside pocket of his jacket. With precise movements, he filled out a check and handed it to the landlord without saying a word. The man looked at the amount and almost choked. It was 6 months of rent in advance. This is too much, sir." "The debt is smaller," stuttered the landlord. Henry finally looked at the landlord with an expression that admitted no discussion. His voice was calm but loaded with authority when he spoke, making it clear that he would not tolerate any questioning. The landlord practically bowed, muttering thanks and apologies, before quickly disappearing down the hallway. Evelyn watched everything as if in a dream, unable to process how quickly her situation had changed. Minutes ago, she was about to be evicted, Now she had half a year of rent paid. Consider the extra as compensation for the inconvenience caused to these ladies. And if you ever bother them again, I'll buy this entire building, Henry said coldly to the retreating landlord. Evelyn began to protest about the payment, saying she couldn't accept it, that she hadn't saved him expecting a reward. But Henry gently interrupted her, taking her hands between his. His manicured hands contrasted with hers, calloused and dry from hard work, but he held them with reverence as if they were the most precious in the world. He explained that the money was nothing compared to what she had done, that she had not only physically saved his life, but also restored his faith in humanity. Evelyn, you gave me more than bone marrow. You gave me a reason to live, proof that pure goodness still exists in this world, he declared emotionally. Evelyn's mother began to cry silently, finally understanding the magnitude of the sacrifice her daughter had made. She rose from her chair with difficulty and hugged Evelyn, murmuring words of pride and love. Henry observed the scene with emotion, seeing the genuine love between mother and daughter, something he had never experienced in his own life. After a moment, he softly cleared his throat and continued with his revelations. "But that's not all, Evelyn. There is much more I need to tell and do," he announced with a mysterious smile. Henry explained how he had spent weeks looking for her after recovering. The hospital couldn't provide information due to privacy issues, and all he knew was her first name and that she had been fired from the company. He told about hiring private investigators, about the frustration of each false lead, about the growing desperation of not being able to find his savior. His assistants had turned the city upside down, checking each cleaning company, each employment record. It was only when one of the investigators thought to check hospital records of bone marrow donations that they finally found her. "I looked for you everywhere. I couldn't rest knowing you were suffering because of me," he explained urgently. Evelyn wiped the tears that now flowed freely down her face. The revelation that he had searched for her, that he had not simply moved on with his rich life and forgotten about her, deeply touched her heart. She had assumed she had saved just another indigent person who would disappear in his own struggle for survival. Discovering that she had saved a rich and powerful man who was now there to help her was too much to process. "I thought you were just another poor soul like me. I never imagined, never dreamed," she said with a broken voice. Henry then took the leather folder he was carrying and opened it, revealing official documents with seals and signatures. They were contracts, deeds, legal documents that Evelyn didn't fully understand but were clearly important. He began to explain what he had prepared, each document representing a fundamental change in Evelyn's life. There were company partnership papers, bank transfers, lifetime medical benefits for her and her mother. The magnitude of what he was offering was staggering. "Evelyn, I want you to be my partner in the company. 30% of everything I've built is now yours," he announced solemnly. Evelyn stepped back in shock, almost tripping over the cardboard boxes. 30% of a multi-million-dollar company? She, a simple cleaner who had barely studied beyond the basics. This couldn't be real, there had to be some mistake. She shook her head frantically, trying to return the documents to Henry. She didn't deserve this. She knew nothing about management, it would be a disaster. But Henry was firm, explaining that he wasn't asking her to run the company, just to be his conscience, to ensure that the humanity she demonstrated permeated all decisions. "I can't accept this. It's too much. I don't know anything about companies," she protested desperately. Henry smiled with affection and patience, explaining that he had thought of everything. She would have assistants, consultants, all the support necessary to learn. But more importantly, she would bring something that no MBA could teach: genuine compassion, understanding of the needs of ordinary workers, the perspective of someone who knows the daily struggle for survival. He told her about his weeks of recovery, lying in the hospital thinking about how his company had become a cold, soulless place. Evelyn had shown the way to change. "You know what employees need because you were one of them. You know about dignity in work because you lived it," he argued. Evelyn's mother intervened at this moment, her voice weak but full of the wisdom of years. She told her daughter that God works in mysterious ways, that perhaps all the suffering had been preparation for this moment. She reminded Evelyn of all the times she had helped others, even when she had nothing, of how she always chose kindness even when it hurt her. Now the universe was giving back, not as charity but as justice. The elderly lady took Henry's hand and placed it on Evelyn's. "My daughter, accept it. You deserve every blessing you are receiving," the mother advised with tears in her eyes. Henry then suggested they go to the company immediately. He had called an extraordinary meeting with all employees, something he didn't fully explain but said was important. Evelyn protested about her appearance, but Henry insisted it was perfect as is. He wanted everyone to see exactly who she was, without disguises or pretensions. One of the assistants helped Evelyn's mother, while the other collected the cardboard boxes to store the apartment. "Come as you are. I want everyone to see the woman who taught me the true value of humanity," Henry insisted. The trip to the company was surreal for Evelyn. She was sitting in a luxurious limousine, drinking ice water from crystal, while just a few hours ago she was about to be evicted. Her mother looked in wonder at the interior of the vehicle, timidly touching the soft leather of the seats. Henry explained more details about his plans during the journey, about the changes he wanted to implement in the company, about how the experience had transformed his vision of business. Evelyn listened to everything in a state of shock, occasionally pinching herself to make sure she wasn't dreaming. "Is this real? Is this really happening?" she asked repeatedly. Upon arriving at the imposing glass and steel building of Wallace Enterprises, Evelyn felt a wave of anxiety. A few weeks ago, she'd been escorted out of there like a criminal, humiliated and fired in front of everyone. Now she was returning alongside the owner, about to become a partner. The irony was almost too much to process. Security guards who once ignored her now opened doors and bowed. Employees passing by stopped and looked curiously, some recognizing her with expressions of shock. "Isn't that the cleaner who was fired?" she heard someone whisper. Henry guided her through the main lobby, the same one where she had cleaned the floor so many times. Now she walked across the polished marble, not as a servant, but as a future partial owner. They entered the executive elevator, something Evelyn had never used in 5 years of work. As they ascended, Henry held her hand, feeling her nervousness and offering silent support. The elevator stopped on the top floor, where the company's main auditorium was located. "Don't be afraid. You deserve to be here more than anyone," Henry encouraged. The auditorium doors opened, revealing hundreds of employees gathered, from high-ranking executives to cleaning and maintenance staff. A murmur ran through the crowd when they saw Evelyn entering alongside Henry. Familiar faces stared at her with expressions ranging from curiosity to shock. On the stage was a podium with a microphone, and Henry gently guided Evelyn there. She could feel all eyes on her, judging, questioning, speculating. What is she doing here? Why is she with Mr. Wallace? Voices whispered throughout the audience. Henry took the microphone first, his strong, clear voice echoing through the auditorium. He began by telling about his illness, about the leukemia that almost killed him. The audience listened in absolute silence as he described his decision to test the kindness of employees, about disguising himself as a beggar. Faces began to turn pale when he detailed the hours he spent being ignored, despised, treated like human trash. Some executives that Evelyn recognized began to shift uncomfortably in their chairs. "I spent hours at our door asking for just a piece of bread. 500 employees passed by me. Only one person stopped," Henry revealed with a heavy voice. Henry then pointed to Evelyn, who was trembling by his side. He told in detail how she had shared her only meal, how she had been kind and respectful, how she had said the words that changed everything. "You are not alone." The auditorium was in deathly silence as he described her unjust dismissal, the sacrifice she had made. Some cleaning staff began to cry, remembering the scene. Others lowered their heads in shame. This woman lost everything for showing humanity. "She was fired for having a heart," said Henry with a voice trembling with emotion. Then Henry told about the hospital, about the miraculous discovery that Evelyn was compatible, about her risking her own life to save him even without knowing who he was. Gasps of surprise echoed through the auditorium when he revealed the extent of her sacrifice. Many didn't know about the bone marrow donation, only about the dismissal. Now they understood the magnitude of what had happened. Henry had to stop several times, overwhelmed by emotion as he remembered. Evelyn cried silently by his side. She almost died to save an unknown beggar. "That is the quality of person Evelyn is," he declared. Henry then made the announcement that would change everything. With a strong, clear voice, he declared that Evelyn was now a partner in the company with 30% ownership, that she would be vice president of human relations and employee well-being, that no important decision would be made without her approval. The silence was broken by gasps of shock, some scattered applause mainly from the cleaning staff, and incredulous murmurs from the executives. Evelyn covered her face with her hands, feeling the magnitude of the moment. "From today forward, Evelyn is my partner and has my full support and trust," Henry announced definitively. It was then that Evelyn saw Stanton rise from his chair in the first row. The supervisor was red with rage and indignation, his face contorted in an expression of pure contempt. He marched up to the stage, ignoring the protests of other employees, and took one of the side microphones. His voice was trembling with fury when he began to speak, questioning Henry's decision, saying it was absurd to put an ignorant cleaner in a position of power. "This is ridiculous. She has no qualifications. She knows nothing about management." "It's a joke," Stanton shouted. Stanton continued with his harsh words, listing all of Evelyn's supposed flaws, inventing stories about incompetence, about problems she never caused. He appealed to the prejudice of the executives, talking about maintaining the company's standard, about not allowing sentimentality to destroy what was built. Some executives seemed to agree, murmuring support. Evelyn shrank back, each word like a knife cutting into her already fragile confidence. Stanton then turned directly to her. "You don't belong here. You never belonged. You're just a cleaner," he spat with venom. Henry stepped forward, positioning himself protectively in front of Evelyn. His expression had completely changed, the gentle businessman replaced by the powerful leader who had built an empire. His voice was dangerously low when he began to respond, but each word carried the weight of his authority. He reminded everyone that the company was his, built with his sweat and sacrifice, and that he would decide who deserved to be part of it. "Stanton, you represent everything that is wrong with this company. Arrogance, cruelty, lack of humanity," Henry said coldly. Henry then revealed that he had investigated Stanton's actions over the years. He discovered a pattern of abuse of power, moral harassment against subordinates, talented people fired on a whim. He had documentation, witnesses, evidence of years of toxic behavior that had gone unnoticed or been ignored. Each revelation made Stanton grow paler, his initial bravado evaporating. Other employees began to murmur, some confirming the accusations with their own experiences. "You're a petty tyrant who uses power to destroy people." "How many Evelyns have you destroyed over the years?" Henry accused. The final blow came when Henry announced that Stanton was fired, effective immediately. Not just fired, but with a note in his file that would ensure no respectable company would hire him. Security guards came onto the stage to escort him out. Stanton tried to protest, threaten lawsuits, but Henry had all the legal documents prepared. As he was being taken out, Stanton cast a final hateful look at Evelyn. "You'll regret this. You are nothing. You'll never be anything," he shouted as he was dragged away. Evelyn was trembling after the confrontation, but Henry held her hand and brought her to the microphone. It was her turn to speak, to address the people she had worked with, who had witnessed her humiliation. She looked at the crowd, saw familiar faces from the cleaning staff who supported her, skeptical executives and everyone in between. She took a deep breath and began to speak, her voice initially weak but gaining strength. "I know many of you must be confused, perhaps even outraged. I am too," she began honestly. Evelyn spoke about her life, about knowing the daily struggle of those who work hard for little, about the dignity of honest work, whether cleaning floors or running companies. She promised she would use her new position to ensure everyone was treated with respect, that no one else would be humiliated as she was. She talked about creating support programs, fair benefits, real opportunities for growth. Her voice gained passion as she spoke, and more people began to pay attention. "I won't pretend I know everything about management, but I know about people, about needs, about dignity, and I'll learn the rest," she promised. When Evelyn finished speaking, the silence lasted only a moment before erupting into applause. It started with the cleaning and maintenance staff, then spread to the administrative employees, and finally even some executives joined in. Not all of them, some still looked skeptical, but many were touched by her sincerity. Evelyn cried openly now. Henry hugged her on stage, not caring about protocol. "You were perfect. They needed to hear that," he whispered. After the meeting, Henry took Evelyn to see what would be her new office. It was a spacious area with a view of the city, furnished with elegance but without ostentation. Evelyn couldn't believe that place would be hers, that she would work there. She touched the polished wooden desk, looked through the panoramic window, and had to sit down when her legs weakened. Henry sat beside her and explained that he had prepared everything: assistants, consultants, a personalized training program. "I don't expect you to know everything immediately, but I trust your judgment about what's right," he assured her. Evelyn then remembered her mother, who had been waiting in a break room. They rushed to get her, finding the elderly lady being carefully attended to by staff with tea and biscuits. Evelyn's mother was radiant with pride, telling everyone who would listen about her daughter's kindness since childhood. When she saw Evelyn, she stood up with difficulty and hugged her. The two cried together, years of struggle and sacrifice finally rewarded. "Your grandmother always said you were special." "She was right," said the emotional mother. Henry arranged for a driver to take Evelyn's mother home, promising that from now on they would have all necessary support: private doctors, household help, whatever they needed. The elderly lady kissed Henry's hands in gratitude, blessing him repeatedly. Before leaving, she whispered something in his ear that made him smile. Evelyn asked what her mother had said, but Henry just smiled mysteriously. "Your mother is a wise woman. She said I saved you both, but the truth is that you saved me," he revealed. As the day came to an end, Evelyn and Henry remained in the office, discussing plans and ideas. Evelyn shared her observations from years working in cleaning, the unmet needs, the small daily cruelties that could be easily corrected. Henry listened attentively, taking notes, impressed with her unique perspective. Together, they began to sketch changes that would transform the company. "Let's create a place where humanity is valued as much as profit," they planned enthusiastically. At nightfall, Henry insisted on taking Evelyn out to dinner to celebrate. She protested that she wasn't dressed appropriately, still in her simple clothes, but he said it was perfect. They went to a simple restaurant that Evelyn knew, where the food was good and honest. The owner, who had known Evelyn for years, was shocked to see her with the famous businessman. During dinner, they talked not as boss and employee, not as rich and poor, but as two human beings who had shared something profound. "You know, Evelyn, in all my life I've never had a true friend." "I think I do now," Henry confessed. Evelyn told him about the difficult days after surgery, about almost being evicted, about hunger and despair. Henry listened with tears in his eyes, asking forgiveness for not finding her sooner. Evelyn reassured him, saying that perhaps she needed to go through that to value the opportunity even more. They talked about the future, about the changes they would make together, about how they would prove that business and compassion could coexist. "It wasn't suffering in vain. It made me stronger, more determined to help others," Evelyn philosophized. When Henry left her at home that night, the small, humble apartment seemed different. It hadn't changed physically, but now it was a safe home without the threat of eviction, without fear of tomorrow. Evelyn found her mother sleeping peacefully, a smile on her aged face. She knelt beside the bed and said a prayer of gratitude. She thanked God for Henry's life, for the opportunity received for divine justice. "Thank you, God, I promise to use this blessing to bless others," she promised in prayer. Before sleeping, Evelyn looked out the window at the illuminated city. Somewhere out there were other people going through what she had experienced: hunger, despair, injustice. But now she had the power to make a difference. She wouldn't be just another rich and indifferent executive. She would be the voice of the voiceless, the defender of the humble, living proof that kindness and success could go hand in hand. The phone rang. It was Henry, just checking if they had arrived home safely. "Sleep well, partner. Tomorrow we begin to change the world, one act of kindness at a time," he said before hanging up. Evelyn lay down on her mattress on the floor, her body still sore from surgery, but her heart lighter than it had felt in a long time. She thought of Stanton, probably furious somewhere, jobless just as she had been. But she felt no anger or desire for revenge, only pity. He had chosen cruelty and reaped its fruits. She had chosen kindness and now reaped rewards she never imagined. May he find redemption. Everyone deserves a second chance, she thought before falling asleep. The sun rose differently the next morning for Evelyn, coming through the window of her humble apartment with a promise of new beginnings. She got up from the mattress on the floor, her muscles still protesting from the recent surgery, but her spirit renewed by the extraordinary change in her life. She prepared coffee for her mother with the few ingredients they still had, but now without the anguish of not knowing where the next meal would come from. While the aroma of coffee filled the small kitchen, she looked at the maid's uniform hanging on the chair and decided to wash it and store it carefully. I'll never forget where I came from. This uniform will always remind me, she thought as she folded the garment with care. Her mother woke up to the smell of coffee, and Evelyn helped her get up and settle at the kitchen table. The two women drank coffee in silence for a few minutes, still processing the extraordinary events of the previous day. The elderly lady held her daughter's hand across the table, her eyes full of pride and admiration. Evelyn noticed that her mother's hands trembled less today, as if the relief from financial stress was already affecting her health. "Daughter, you've always been special. Now the world will see what I've always seen," said her mother with an emotional voice. The phone rang and it was Henry, asking if Evelyn could arrive earlier at the company to start working on the planned changes. She immediately agreed, feeling a mixture of anxiety and enthusiasm. She took a quick shower and put on her best outfit, which was still simple and modest compared to the corporate environment she was now part of. Before leaving, she checked if her mother had everything she needed and promised to return to have lunch with her. "Go, my daughter. Go make the difference you were born to make," her mother encouraged. The trip to the company was made in the car that Henry had sent, a still surreal experience for Evelyn, who was used to walking or taking crowded buses. The driver treated her with respect, calling her ma'am and asking if the air conditioning temperature was comfortable. She watched the city pass by through the window, seeing the same streets from a different perspective, no longer running late and worried, but with time to really observe. "It's incredible how the same city looks different when you're not desperate," she reflected aloud. Upon arriving at the company, Evelyn was greeted by an assistant Henry had assigned to help her. She was a competent but kind young woman who showed no prejudice about Evelyn having been a cleaner. She guided Evelyn to the office, explaining the basic systems, showing where departments were located, introducing key people. Evelyn absorbed everything like a sponge, determined to learn and be worthy of the opportunity given to her. "Don't worry about memorizing everything today. I'm here to help you with whatever you need," the assistant reassured her. Henry appeared shortly after, carrying a stack of reports on the working conditions of employees at different levels. He had spent the night reviewing documents, discovering salary disparities, lack of basic benefits for lower-level employees, and other injustices that had accumulated over the years. The two sat at the meeting table in Evelyn's office and began analyzing each problem. Evelyn contributed valuable insights based on her experience, pointing out needs that the reports didn't capture. "Look here, Henry. The cleaning staff has nowhere to heat their food. They eat cold meals every day," she observed, pointing to a photo of the cafeteria. The first project Evelyn proposed was creating a proper cafeteria for all employees, not just executives. Her space where everyone could have decent meals, regardless of position. Henry approved immediately and called the infrastructure department to begin planning. Evelyn insisted on participating in every meeting, learning about budgets, deadlines, logistics. She asked questions no one had considered before. What about people with dietary restrictions? What about those who need to eat at different times because of their shift? She questioned during discussions. During the first week, Evelyn established a routine of arriving early and walking through all floors of the company, talking with employees at all levels. She knew many from the cleaning and maintenance team from her years working there, but now she also made efforts to meet secretaries, analysts, managers. Each conversation revealed small problems that accumulated into great dissatisfaction. She kept a notebook where she wrote down everything, from the lack of water fountains on certain floors to the need for daycare for employees with children. "How much time do you waste each day going to get water on another floor?" she asked employees on the third floor. Henry watched Evelyn work with growing admiration, She had a natural ability to make people feel heard and valued. Employees who had never expressed dissatisfaction began to seek her out, trusting that she truly cared. In 2 weeks, Evelyn had identified dozens of simple improvements that would make a big difference in workers' quality of life. Henry approved a special budget to implement these changes. "Evelyn, you've accomplished in 2 weeks what consultants couldn't in years," he praised during a meeting. The most significant transformation came when Evelyn proposed an education program for employees. She had discovered that many wanted to study but lacked resources or time. She proposed that the company offer scholarships and flexible hours for those who wanted to qualify. Henry not only approved but expanded the idea, creating partnerships with local universities. The first to enroll was a maintenance man who dreamed of becoming an electronics technician. "I always wanted to study, but with 5 children there was never enough money. Thank you, Ms. Evelyn," he said with tears in his eyes. Evelyn also instituted an emergency assistance program for employees in difficulty, a fund to help in cases of family illness, accidents, or other crises. She insisted it be confidential and without excessive bureaucracy, remembering her own difficulties when she needed help. The first to benefit was a receptionist whose son needed surgery. The woman cried upon receiving the news that the company would cover the costs. "My son will be able to walk normally again. How can I thank you?" sobbed the grateful mother. In meetings with executives, Evelyn initially felt intimidated, but Henry always supported her, validating her contributions and ensuring she was heard. Over time, she gained confidence and began to defend her ideas more firmly. When a director questioned the cost of the proposed benefits, she presented numbers showing how more satisfied employees produced more and missed fewer days. Her simple but solid argumentation convinced even the most skeptical. "Investing in people is not a cost. It's an investment in the company's future," she argued with conviction. The friendship between Evelyn and Henry deepened each day. They often had lunch together, not in expensive restaurants but in the new cafeteria that had been built. Henry discovered the pleasure of simple meals shared with someone who saw him as a person, not as a source of money or power. Evelyn made him laugh with stories from her life, and he shared memories of when he started the company with just a dream. "You know, Evelyn, I had forgotten why I started all this. You made me remember," he confessed during lunch. Evelyn made a point of maintaining contact with all cleaning staff, ensuring they didn't feel abandoned now that she had risen. She created a rotation system where they could participate in meetings and make suggestions directly. One of the cleaning ladies suggested changing cleaning products to less toxic options, which was immediately implemented. The same woman was promoted to sustainability supervisor. Who better to take care of the environment than someone who cleans it every day? Evelyn justified in the board meeting. Evelyn's mother's health improved significantly with access to proper doctors and regular medication. The elderly lady now spent her afternoons at a community center that the company had created for employees' family members. There she did crafts, talked with other ladies, and felt useful teaching sewing. Evelyn visited her every day at lunch and they shared news. "I'm so proud of you, daughter. Your father would be too," her mother frequently said. A month after taking her position, Evelyn received an unexpected visit. Donna Rosa, the colleague with whom she had shared sandwiches so many times, appeared in her office. The lady was retired but struggling with a minimum pension. Evelyn immediately hired her as a consultant for the elderly employees' wellness program. Donna Rosa cried when signing the contract. "You didn't forget about us, Evelyn. God bless you," she thanked emotionally. Henry began taking Evelyn to meetings with other business people, introducing her as his partner and right hand. Initially, many showed surprise and even disdain upon discovering her humble origins, but Evelyn won them over with her authenticity and innovative ideas. In a meeting about social responsibility, she proposed that companies adopt nearby streets, keeping them clean and safe. The idea was so well received that it became a municipal program. "Sometimes the best ideas come from those who see problems up close," she told the business people. The company began receiving recognition for the transformation in its organizational culture. Journalists wanted to interview Evelyn about her extraordinary story, but she always insisted on sharing credit with Henry and focusing on the implemented changes, not on herself. In an interview, she said something that went viral on social media. It wasn't luck. It was the natural consequence of kindness. When you plant compassion, you harvest miracles, she declared with simplicity. Evelyn implemented a program where executives spent 1 day per month working in operational functions, cleaning, maintenance, reception. The initial resistance was great, but Henry fully supported it, himself being the first to participate. Seeing the company president cleaning bathrooms caused a profound impact on the corporate culture. Executives began treating employees at all levels with more respect. "Now I understand how difficult and important your work is," admitted a director after his day in cleaning. 3 months after her arrival, Evelyn discovered that many employees lived far away because they couldn't afford rent near the company. She proposed creating a housing allowance scaled according to salary. Those who earned less would receive proportionally more help. Henry calculated the numbers and approved, realizing that employees who spent less time and money on transportation were more productive and happy. It's simple math. Happy employee is productive employee, Evelyn explained to the board. The transformation in the company attracted talents who previously wouldn't consider working there. Young professionals wanted to be part of a company with human values. The turnover rate dropped dramatically, saving millions in hiring and training. Evelyn created a mentoring program where experienced employees taught newcomers, creating bonds and preserving knowledge. "Everyone has something to teach and something to learn," was the program's motto. As the last families left the park and the lights began to come on in the city, Evelyn and Henry remained seated, silently planning the next steps of their mission. They had transformed one company, but the world was full of companies in need of transformation. They had changed hundreds of lives, but millions still needed change. The journey that began with a sandwich shared on a cold sidewalk had become a movement of compassion and justice. "Kindness is contagious, Henry. Let's continue spreading this epidemic," said Evelyn as she stood up. The two walked back together to the company building, now illuminated and welcoming, so different from that cold place where everything had begun. Night cleaning staff greeted them warmly, without the subservience of the past but with genuine respect. Evelyn knew each one by name, knew about their families, their dreams. Henry had learned to do the same. Together they had created more than a successful company. They had created a community. "Each life we touch touches 10 others. That's how we change the world," Evelyn philosophized. As they said goodbye that night, Henry hugged Evelyn for a long time, an embrace of infinite gratitude and true friendship. Two human beings whom destiny had united in an extraordinary way, proving that miracles happen when kindness meets opportunity. Evelyn returned to her simple apartment, where her mother waited for her with hot tea and cookies. The two sat together, the daughter telling about her day, the mother listening with infinite pride. "You've accomplished more in 1 year than many do in a lifetime," said her mother. Evelyn looked out the window before going to sleep, seeing the same city, the same stars, but everything seemed different now. She had learned that an act of kindness, however small it may seem, can create waves that transform entire oceans. Her sacrifice in helping a homeless man had multiplied into hope for hundreds of people, and this was just the beginning. She closed her eyes for a moment, remembering that fateful night when she shared her last sandwich with a man she thought was just another victim of social indifference. Who could imagine that that simple gesture, born of pure compassion, would change so many lives? Not just hers and Henry's, but each employee who now had dignity at work. Each family that slept peacefully knowing there was security and support. Each young person who could now dream of education and a better future. Tears rolled gently down her face, not of sadness but of deep gratitude. Gratitude for having been an instrument of transformation, for having proved that kindness is not weakness, but the greatest strength there is. She thought of all those who still needed help, all the companies where employees were treated as numbers, all the Evelyns and Henrys around the world waiting for someone to reach out. "Tomorrow we do more. We can always do more," she murmured before falling asleep, at peace with her found purpose. And as sleep gently enveloped her, a serene smile remained on her lips, for she knew she had found not just a job or a position, but her true mission in life, to be living proof that when we choose love over fear, compassion over indifference, and humanity over profit. Miracles don't just happen, they multiply infinitely, touching lives in ways we could never imagine. Now tell me in the comments where you're from and tell me, did you like this story? Then subscribe to the channel, leave your like and check out the next one that's waiting for you here on the screen. I'll see you there.